So in today's video, we are going to be discussing the Ryan Tannehill, Malik Willis, Tennessee Titans situation. Now, before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and let's jump right into the video. So obviously the Tennessee Titans, Ryan Tannehill, Malik Willis, they're in a kind of a rocky situation right now. They're in a rough spot, but I think this rough spot is honestly being blown out of proportion a million different ways, because I don't think personally there is actually anything wrong with this situation. I don't think Ryan Tannehill said anything wrong. I don't think really the Tennessee Titans did anything wrong. And I don't think Malik Willis did anything wrong. Obviously, he can't do anything wrong because he was drafted. He's just there. He's kind of that third party guy right now. So really, Malik Willis, none of this is on Malik Willis. And again, it's kind of like Jordan Love in a way. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is obviously a bigger star than Ryan Tannehill. But at the same time, Malik Willis is in that same spot as Jordan Love. He's taking all the fire right now, and it's not really warranted because it's not really his fault. And Ryan Tannehill is taking a lot of fire right now. And again, I don't think it's warranted. I don't think it's fair. And I think it's blown completely out of proportion. So Ryan Tannehill said that it's not his job to mentor Malik Willis, but he did end that quote by saying that if he learns from Ryan Tannehill, that's great. So obviously what Ryan Tannehill is saying, it's not his job to coach up Malik Willis, and it's not. What he's saying is that if Malik Willis has questions, if Malik Willis has any concerns, anything that he needs to learn from Ryan Tannehill, come ask him. I don't think Ryan Tannehill is just going to brush Malik Willis off to the side and be like, no, figure it out yourself. No, go to the coaching staff. That's not what Ryan Tannehill is saying. He's basically saying it's not his job to coach Malik Willis, and he's completely right. I really don't think Ryan Tannehill said anything wrong at all. I think this is blown completely out of proportion. Is it interesting? Of course it's interesting, because if we look at Ryan Tannehill, he's obviously not had the best few months. Right now, I feel like Ryan Tannehill is getting to that point of his career where he is fighting for his starting job. He's sneakily getting old in the NFL, and so he's fighting for his NFL job right now. He's fighting for his NFL life. Last season ended really, really badly for the Tennessee Titans and Ryan Tannehill. It was not a good ending whatsoever. Obviously, the regular season for the Titans was a bit of an up and down one. They finished the season 12-5. They got the #1 seed, but they had a record number of injuries. They had a record number of players that they had to play. So the season for the Tennessee Titans was not easy last year. The fact that they were 12-5 last year is very, very impressive, and Ryan Tannehill obviously deserves a little bit of respect for what he did for that Titans team. You can argue all you want about how much he did, but he was there. He was a factor in the Titans going 12-5 last year. They lost Derrick Henry at points last season. AJ Brown was hurt. We'll get to that here in a second. But like, there was people injured like crazy for the Titans last year, and they still got the #1 seed in the AFC through everything that happened with them last year. Now, obviously, the playoff game was very disappointing and not how you wanted the season to end. They lost their very first playoff game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Ryan Tannehill throwing 3 interceptions, kind of ending the Tennessee Titans season, and it's obviously not a way you want to go out. You're a team that fought this hard to get to the playoffs. You got the #1 seed. The Titans were a team that once Derrick Henry went down, once they had all these injuries, I didn't think they would be much. I really didn't, because there's no way you can really come back from all that. And not only did they come back from that, they got the #1 seed, but as a #1 seed, it is kind of disappointing to lose your first playoff game. You would think that there would be a little bit of an edge for that team. You know, they knew people were counting them out. They didn't think that they were a legitimate #1 seed. That, again, that's another thing you can debate, but they did it. And so the Titans, the way their season ended last year was very, very disappointing. And obviously it was disappointing for Ryan Tannehill, because Ryan Tannehill's offseason has been pretty bad for him. He said he was in a dark place after that divisional game against the Bengals. He said he had to go to therapy because it makes sense. That game probably took everything out of him. He knew how hard he had to fight to get there, and he probably knew that his time in the NFL as a starting quarterback could be coming to an end, and it took a toll on him, because you never want to lose your job in the NFL. It's a very sacred job. There's not many of them, and obviously for Tannehill, knowing how the season ended, it wasn't fun for him. But even through the offseason, you get to the draft, and that's just a draft. This year's Tennessee Titans draft was the weirdest draft that they possibly could have had. It was probably the worst thing that the Tennessee Titans could have done. The very first thing they did was trade away their #1 receiver, AJ Brown, to the Eagles, and then they selected Treylon Burks. And if I'm Ryan Tannehill, I saw the video of Mike Vrabel upset when that happened. Seeing what Ryan Tannehill is probably like after that happened, he's definitely got to be upset too. He said he was shocked. He didn't expect that to happen. I would be upset too, because there's just no way that a quarterback is just going to sit there and be happy with an organization taking away a proven guy, a guy on your offense that you know you can rely on, a guy on the offense that's great. There's no way a quarterback's just going to sit there and be like, okay, I'm okay with this, and then draft a guy at that same position that you just traded away, Treylon Burks. And again, he's in a spot that's not really his fault either, but, you know, they draft Treylon Burks out of Arkansas, a guy that's not proven yet, and obviously Ryan Tannehill's not happy. He lost his number one target on the offense. If I was a quarterback, I would be upset too. But then they also drafted Malik Willis in the 3rd round of this year's draft. And obviously the Titans, they do not have to tell anybody that they're taking a quarterback. I don't think that should necessarily be the story that, you know, Ryan Tannehill wasn't told that they were taking Malik Willis. That is not anything that needs to be talked about. I think those stories are also blown out of proportion. No, a guy like Aaron Rodgers, I think, you know, a little bit of respect towards a guy like that. You know, Tom Brady, proven guys, you know, they deserve a little bit more respect. Be like, hey, we're going to take this guy. I don't think they have the right to negotiate necessarily, but, you know, if the organization's like, hey, we're going to do this, you know, Aaron Rodgers can give in his input, you know, if he wants to, but at the end of the day, it's the organization's move. And I think, you know, guys like Rodgers, Brady, they deserve that respect. But the Tennessee Titans didn't have to tell Ryan Tannehill. But Tannehill also texted Malik Willis after he was drafted to basically congratulate him to the NFL. So at the end of the day, this whole thing is blown out of proportion. When Ryan Tannehill himself, even though he wasn't told anything was going on, still texted Malik Willis after he was drafted. And I think that's important. I think that just shows what Ryan Tannehill is all about. So I think the quote is completely overblown and blown out of proportion, because it isn't Ryan Tannehill's job to mentor Malik Willis. It's not his job to coach him up. It's not his job to turn him into his successor, turn him into the NFL ready quarterback. That's not his job. He has a job. His job is to go out there, win football games for the Tennessee Titans, compete for his starting job, and try to stay as one of the 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. It's not his job whatsoever to make Malik Willis into the next star of the NFL. It's not his job to coach him up, get him ready. None of that is Ryan Tannehill's job. That's the coaching staff. Now, the second part of the quote is really the most important part of the quote, if you ask me, because everybody's more focused on the part where Ryan Tannehill said, hey, it's not my job to mentor him. They're missing the second part where he said if Malik Willis learns from him, that's great too. So Ryan Tannehill's not going to be a toxic teammate. That's not okay in any sense of the words. If Ryan Tannehill starts being a toxic teammate, then that's when we have a problem. But Ryan Tannehill, he's not going to be a toxic teammate. What he's saying is, hey, if we're in the film room together and if he asks questions, I'm more than willing to help him and ask him questions. You know, if Malik Willis asks him, hey, what did you see on this play? What did you see on that play? That's what Ryan Tannehill is getting at. He'll answer those questions because he has on-field experience that Malik Willis doesn't have. And there's only so much as a coaching staff you can do to get Malik Willis up to speed. You have to learn from the guys that are actually on the field running those plays. And I'm all for Ryan Tannehill doing that. You know, that basically Ryan Tannehill, his job is to win football games, but also be a good teammate. His job's not to be a coach. And there's a huge difference between mentoring and answering questions. It's not his job to get him up to speed on the offense. It's not his job to get him up to speed on how plays are ran. It's not on him to work on Malik Willis's mechanics and all that stuff. His job is to be a quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, and it's his job to be a good teammate to Malik Willis. If Malik Willis comes in, asks questions like, hey, how do I improve these mechanics? You know, how do I improve on running this type of play? Then yeah, that Ryan Tannehill should answer those questions. He shouldn't just brush him off and be, you know, a toxic teammate. That's not what should happen. But what needs to stop is the overreaction to this, because Ryan Tannehill is 100% right. Every quarterback situation is different. Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts. You have Joe Flacco and Drew Lock. Every single situation is completely different. And for Ryan Tannehill's sake, a guy that is probably on his last legs as a starting quarterback in the NFL, he's fighting for his job. He's a competitor. He doesn't want to lose his job. He's not going to go out of his way and make Malik Willis so great that, you know, he's going to take his job. He's not going to go out there, teach Malik Willis every single in and out of everything done in the NFL and then end up losing his job to him. That's not what he's going to do. At the end of the day, he's a football player. He's a competitor. But at the end of the day, Ryan Tannehill, he's also going to be a great teammate. And at the end of the day, all this is completely blown out of proportion. But those are my thoughts on the Ryan Tannehill and Malik Willis situation. Give me your thoughts down below of what you think of this situation, and I'll see you in the next one.